Hello, good evening everyone. I want to thank you for attending tonight's webinar on home germination testing. My name is Andrea Springmeyer. I am the in-house germination technician for the preservation department at Seed Savers Exchange. I test the seeds in the collection. All of the seeds that you find in the catalog are typically tested by an independent third party, but I make sure that the yearbook samples come to you in good shape, or I try to. So today we'll be discussing methods for home germination testing, which is how to measure the potential rate of germination for your seeds under optimal conditions. As we go through this presentation, you can feel free to ask any questions by typing them into the Q&A box in the bottom right of your screen, and we'll also have time for questions at the end of the presentation. So the mission of Seed Savers Exchange is to conserve and promote America's culturally diverse but endangered food crop heritage for future generations by collecting, growing, and sharing heirloom seeds and plants. Of course, all of us at one point or another have stumbled upon a packet of old seed or a jar in the dark cupboard, and we've always kind of wondered whether that seed was any good, or even whether it was actually a radish or a beet. Before you want to waste any of your garden space and hours of labor on the seed that may not return the flavor, you may want to test the germination rate. So home germination testing can be done with minimal effort using a lot of household items. Now keep in mind that germination testing does require you to sacrifice a few of your seeds. If the seed quantity that you have is very, very low, you may want to just carefully plant out whatever seeds you have remaining in hopes of increasing your stores of seeds. So next we will gather supplies. Some of the supplies here are things you may want for your home germination test. A thermometer, plastic bags or plastic wrap, rubber bands, a pencil or a waterproof marker, some paper towels, and then some type of container to keep your test upright, and then a spray bottle of water. And in addition to those things, you may want to have a pair of nail clippers on hand for your test in case you run into any hard seeds, and we'll go through some techniques for scarification later. And we'll do a little bit of an anatomy lesson here of the seeds. So here you can see what you're going to be examining with your germinated seeds. On the screen you have an ungerminated bean seed. The seed coat is holding tight to the seed, and is completely intact, and the cotyledons are beneath that. That makes up the primary part of the seed, and that's what will feed the seedling as it grows. Then you have a very small radicle protruding, and the hypocotyl is pretty much undeveloped. It's just the region between the radicle or the new root and the primary leaves. And as the seedling grows, this is the comparison of what you'll have. The cotyledons begin to shrink as the primary leaves grow, the hypocotyl extends, and the primary root and secondary roots develop. So each plant type that you test is going to have different requirements for the seeds to germinate. And if you're working from a packet of seed, those requirements are generally listed on the back of the packet. It's a great reference. You can see that germination is expected within 7 to 14 days, and it prefers warm soil. Another one, the watermelon, would be 4 to 10 days, and they also love heat. There may be other crops such as lettuce which would require cooler temperatures to germinate and would not germinate at temperatures as warm as, say, tomatoes would. And some species also require special procedures such as soaking or pre-chilling prior to planting. If you're going to be testing the seeds' germination, you'll want to do this before the test as well. And some seeds also require light to germinate. You can just check the packet. You can also look online or through other publications for references. It's good to test different areas of your house to see what temperatures you have, to find a suitable area for placing the tests as they incubate. So an area that's 55 to 70 degrees would be good for something like lettuce or other cool season crops, and warm season crops should be about 80 to 85 degrees. So if you just take a thermometer and move it around in your house and just observe what temperature range you get there, that would be the best way to determine where you would want to put your test. It's also preferable, but not absolutely necessary, if the temperature drops by about 10 to 15 degrees at night. Some crops do a little bit better with some variations in temperature. So once you've found suitable conditions for your germination test, you can begin to set up the test. So we start out with layering two pieces of just general paper towels, and you want to write the variety and the start date on the towel using a pencil or a water-resistant marker. You want to soak the towels, or moisten the towels, I'm sorry, but not completely soak them, and you can just use clean tap water for that. As long as your water is good enough to drink, it should be good enough for the test. You generally just want to spray with a spray bottle, maybe a little bit. Otherwise you can dip the paper and then wring it out a bit. You want it to be about as wet as a moistened sponge. If you were to wet a dish sponge and then wring it out, that's about how wet you want your paper to be. Not much wetter than that. If you have excess moisture in your tests, it can actually promote more fungal growth and seed growth, and the fungus on the seed coats can overcome your tests and kill the seedlings. So one good test is if water wells up around your finger when you press on the towel, then it's way too wet. Then after wetting your paper, you want to choose your seeds. You should start out with at least a minimum of 5 seeds, but keep in mind that the more seeds you use, the more accurate your results will be. At Seed Savers here, we typically test 200 seeds, and the AOSA actually tests 400 seeds in every test to get as high an accuracy as possible. For home use, though, 20 to 25 seeds would probably be good enough. If you have a really large quantity and you want to get a really accurate test, you could do 100 seeds. And when you choose your seeds, make sure that you choose, a general, something that represents the whole sample. You don't want to pick out good seeds, good-looking seeds or bad-looking seeds, unless you're going to pick it out of the entire lot, because you want to know what the quality of the whole seed lot is. After choosing your seeds, then you're just going to, I usually set them up in 2 rows on the paper towels, and you want them to be about 1 inch from the top of the towel. You don't want them to fall out while you're rolling it up. Small seeds you want to space at least ½ inch apart, and large seeds, 1 inch to 1.5 inches apart. Mainly because if some of the seeds are dead, they may start to mold, and that can spread to seeds, other seeds in the vicinity. So if you give them a little bit of space, it's less likely that your test will be thrown off by 1 or 2 bad seeds. And then on top of that, also you want to leave about 1 inch or 2 of space on the sides of the towels, and that's just so you have a little bit of room to fold the edges in so the seeds don't fall out there either. And then you're going to take the towel and fold it up, halfway up from the bottom over the seeds, and then roll it loosely from one side to the other. You want to give the seeds a little bit of space to grow. And then once you've got it all rolled up, you can put a rubber band around it to hold the test tight together. Not too tight. You don't want to restrict the root growth of the seedlings as they're going, but just so that everything doesn't fall apart. And then stick it into a plastic baggie. A Ziploc bag works really well. Otherwise, you can put it into a taller container and just cover the entire container with plastic wrap or a covered lid, or a clear lid. You want to make sure that there's some airflow in there, not airflow so much as like an air pocket. It doesn't need ventilation necessarily, but you don't want to seal all the air out of it because seeds, respirate just like we do. So then they do like to be, not too constricted. And for seeds that do require light to germinate, another method for setting it up would be the tapas towels method. You just would set up your towels in the bottom of a container, label it, and then wet them down thoroughly. In this case, you'll want to put a lot more water on it. The seeds aren't going to be completely surrounded by the water, so it won't be as likely for them to grow a lot of fungus, and the water also tends to evaporate a lot faster and cause condensation in the container when it's all spread out like that. So just put as much water as the towels will hold, and then drain off, just let it drip dry a little bit, and that should be perfect for setting up your seeds on top of the towels. And then afterward, you just want to either cover it with a clear plastic lid or some plastic wrap. So then you want to place the container in an area that suits the crop's germination needs. Again, for crops that need pre-chilling, you can set the container in the fridge for a few days and then move it to a warmer location to actually start the test. For a warm season crop, top of a refrigerator or a computer tower works really well, or a DVD player. And for cooler crops, the basement or a north-facing windowsill is a little bit better. It is good to have some indirect light for most of the seeds, even the ones that are wrapped up in the towels, but you certainly don't want to place them in direct sunlight. That could prematurely cook them. Now on to the evaluation. So, you want to check the towel moisture every couple of days, or every day, and add water when you need to. You can start checking the actual seeds development at about 3 days after setup. If you find anything that's very moldy, you can count them as dead and remove them to prevent the mold from spreading to any other seeds. And then you can also, at the same time, count and remove any healthy seedlings as they develop. You want to keep track of how many days it takes for the seeds to germinate fully, and you can use that for future reference. The test is over when all of the seeds have germinated, or the normal number of days as on the back of the seed packet, or from your previous tests when that time is up. And this is what the seed tests look like in a perfect world. And this may be what the seeds look like in a less perfect world. Here we have a couple of seedlings to compare. There's one with good germination. It hasn't quite fully emerged from the seed coat yet, but it's doing really, really well. And then next to it we have one that's been in this test for the same amount of time. You can see a little crack on it, and the radicle has not emerged very far at this point. This could be just a late germinating seed, or it could be an abnormal seedling. And really the only way to tell the difference is just to let it go for a few more days. If it continues to kind of stagnate and not develop normally, then you can judge it to be abnormal and don't include it in your percent of germinated seed. And here's a little bit of a better picture of what makes this abnormal. It's got some mold on it. A lot of seeds that are healthy also have a bit of mold, but that may be inhibiting its growth. It does have the large cracks in the cotyledon, which by themselves may not mean that it would be a bad seed, but in combination with the fact that the radicle is discolored and underdeveloped, I would call this abnormal. And you'll get a feel for it as you go along, which seeds are abnormal in earlier stages, which just won't develop, and which ones will grow out of their problems. And another issue you may run into occasionally is hard seeds. Some crops like beans and okra, all the legumes, may occasionally contain hard seeds. And they're seeds that haven't sprouted, but also haven't become moldy or soft. They pretty much look the same when they come out of the test as they look when they went into it. The problem is that the seed coat becomes impermeable to water as the seeds get old and dry out. the hilum basically becomes a one-way valve and lets moisture out of the seed but won't let it back in. So generally the seeds are still viable, but they may require you to scarify, or scarify, I suppose, scratch or nick the seed coat just a little bit so that moisture and air can get into the seedling, into the seed again. And from my experience, the best tool for this job has been a pair of nail clippers. So you want to scratch the seed surface opposite the hilum, and the hilum is the point where the seed was attached to the pod, and that's where you're least likely to damage important tissues like the radicle. If you scratch right on the hilum, also often that tends to be a hot spot for mold growth, and you could end up infecting your little seedling when you scratch it. We've also tried using razor blades for this job, but often you'll end up cutting a little too deeply with that, and they just seem a little bit more dangerous. Another technique could be just scratching the seed with sandpaper or a nail file. I find that I like the nail clippers better than that, and especially for things like okra. The okra seed coat is very, very thick, and sandpaper it would take forever to wear through that. So after that, you get to calculate the percentage of seedlings that have germinated. So you just take the healthy seedlings over the total number of seeds tested and multiply it by 100, and that gives you the germination rate. So say you started with 25 seeds and 20 of them germinated, that would give you an 80% germination rate. And then one last note, environmental stresses often can reduce the field germination rate of your seeds. A germination test is not actually a test for seed vigor. Seed vigor can decrease even as the germination rate remains really high. So to maintain both high vigor and higher germination, you should store seeds at low constant temperatures with very low humidity. And of course, some species and varieties just don't store as well as others, which is why regular germination testing is very important. And if you would like to save your seedlings after the test, it's generally not recommended, but I have heard of a few people doing it. Many species just don't handle transplanting at such an early stage very easily. The stems and roots are really very fragile, and sudden changes in environment can trigger shock in the little seedlings. But if you really want to give it an effort, you can, I would suggest you leave the seedling attached to the paper towels as best as possible and just cut out around their roots, and then plant it indoors in a clean, loose seed starting mix until they're ready to be moved outside. This concludes the webinar for the evening. I want to thank you all again for attending. If you're interested in more details, you can check out Suzanne Ashworth's Seed to Seed or Organic Seed Alliance's Seed Saving Guides for Gardeners and Farmers. There's also a PDF accompaniment to this presentation available on our website.